Hey, welcome to the New England Endurance Podcast. I am Art Trapotsis, and today I'm thrilled to have one of the largest and oldest cycling clubs in New England, the Charles River Wheelers, otherwise known as CRW. And my guest today is Randolph Williams, president of CRW, and an accomplished cyclist and advocate himself, and someone who I think you'll come to realize embodies the spirit of CRW, which we're going to learn more about today. Welcome, Randolph.
Thank you so much, Art, for having me on the show.
Yes, and I just discovered that Randolph is a fellow jumbo, so shout out to Tufts.
Excellent. Yes.
Let me set the stage here a little bit with this episode and tell you a little more about Randolph. So he grew up in a family steeped in social activism and turned his personal experiences into a powerful voice for change with his essay, Biking While Black. And this thought-provoking piece not only shed light on some inequalities in cycling, but also inspired things like the Wheels of Change Strava art project, which I did the S on that, I believe, and also the New England Cycling Coalition for Diversity. I really look forward to hearing about these pieces of your story and how this sort of weaves into your leadership with CRW. You're an endurance athlete yourself. When I was reading your bio, you've done some Boston marathons. You've ridden from Boston to Montreal or vice versa, you know. So how did you get into endurance sports?
When I was a child, I had asthma. So I know that I remember going out, and my dad would head me out, and I went to a track meet. And probably was 8 or some age, some young child. And I did my running race. I was in the first quarter lap. I was ahead of everyone. And then I was at the end.
Started heaving.
I started heaving. Exactly. But I think when I went through all of my college years and got out into the real world, I did computer science, and so I was one of those people that like computer is a good friend because I could turn it off when it annoys me.
Yep.
And my dad just said one day after I got into the workforce, he's just like, "Oh, you're getting soft, a little, fat. You need to go do some exercise." That's good, kind of how it started. And my dad effectively, I guess, goaded me into, and I'd say, well, I got swept up into I got hooked into the cycling world, and I started, with the bike racing, Lance Armstrong, the whole 9 yards. I'm like, oh, I could do that. Let's go do some things. And I loved cycling. I had some challenges personally, just being able to do long events. I didn't actually figure it all out until maybe in the last 10 years, 5 to 10 years. And I kind of started going hog wild on, I did some testing for salt and different kinds of...
Yeah, checking your metabolism and your, nutrients and salt intake. Did you, just curious, what team did you ride or race for when you were kind of coming up in New England?
BRC was one.
Boston Road Club.
Yep.
Shout out. That's me and Eric back in the, late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah. Dream Bikes was another one.
Yep.
And those were the two primary, I thought it was with NEBC for a year or two.
As was I. Yeah. It seems like everyone kind of came through NEBC at one point back in the 90s.
Yeah, there was one race I did the Green Mountain Stage race. I mean, just to give you an idea of where my perspective was. I was so far behind. Dick Ring, he called out my name, and I'm like, why is he calling out my name? They thought I was ahead of the pack because I was so far behind. So just to give you a perspective on my cycling prowess at that point. But I figured out, I lose a lot of salt. And finally figured this out like 4 or 5 years ago.
Dialed it in. What's the trick? Just curious. You'd get some Noon tablets.
It was more than Noon tablets. Most people lose like 1,500 milligrams of sodium in a day, and
that seems like a lot.
I was 2,600 per hour of exercise.
Wow.
So I would come in. My wife would see me, all caked in salt. And it's just like, oh, let's run a normal ride. So I have to put in a lot of salt.
What are you taking in? Some sort of liquid, or?
I actually started mixing my own concoction with how much salt I need. Because once you do the sweat test, you can figure out how much you actually need.
Where can folks do a sweat test?
You can go to, I think it's Sweat rx.com, or they're
They
place.
send it home to you? It's
They
like
send it home. And then actually now I have a digital device that I wear on my heart strap that can tell me also how much salt I'm losing at that
well,
particular
this is
instant.
really interesting because I'm sort of a a nerd when it comes to performance and performance improvements. But you did a couple of solo rides from Boston to Montreal.
Yeah, I wouldn't have done it without me figuring this stuff out, honestly,
Wow.
because I started like, okay, the days of racing. I had a child. I'm just like, that's done.
Yeah, same
But-
here. How many miles is Boston to Montreal?
330.
And how many days does that take you?
It's 3 days typically for me, or I've done it in 2. So
Oh, wow.
the 2-day way how it kind of operates, I figured out with the pattern with my wife, the rest of my family, wife and child, is they'll go to a hotel.
Yeah.
Like, so coming back from Montreal, they would go in a hotel in Colchester,
Mm-hmm.
Vermont. That would be okay. So I'm gonna make it there to Colchester.
It's like 100 miles away.
Yeah, that was 100 miles, not bad. But then the next part is the 200 miles coming back home.
Ooh.
It's easier coming home than it is to go up because it's downhill.
Yeah, yeah.
And so Colchester, I said, I'm going to go to Dunkin' Donuts. When they open up, I'll be there. And then I'm going to ride home. And then hopefully I make it. And if you have to pick me up, you pick me up because I'll hopefully be closer to home than that. But I've used that pattern where my wife and child are staying in a hotel somewhere. Actually, I did Ithaca to Boston as well. So,
Oh, man.
So that was also 400.
That sounds like fun.
400, yeah, 440. So, yeah.
So getting on a CRW here, just so our listeners know, CRW is Charles River. Okay, so we're talking about Charles River, the great Charles River that runs through Boston and points west. So this is a Boston-based club. How did the club start? Like, what's the history? I understand that it's over 50 years old.
Yes, it is. We're going up on our 50th. Well, our 60th anniversary is coming up in 2026.
Nice.
It was started by a doctor.
Dr. Ralph Galen.
Ralph Galen started it, and he actually went on to help co-found the League of American Bicyclists as well. So there's a whole story
Wow.
there. And he started the club, and it's funny. You go back and look at the old pictures of people that were cycling. It's back then. It's diverse. They got women, Black people. Like you see these old pictures, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh wow, this is very interesting. So that was how it started. I think he passed away in 2000 and right before COVID, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I never got a chance to talk to him, but some people talk. I hear some old time stories from folks.
Well, he started a great thing. Yeah. I'm curious, like, what his mission was when he first started this thing. Do you have any sense for that? Or
I don't have a really great sense of that, and this is where I wish I had some historians to give you more perspective than I can give you. But I can tell you, at least from my perspective, how I started in CRW was right after school, and I said, "Oh, I like this biking thing,"
mm-hmm.
and you and I both went to Tufts, and so that was in Medford area, and they had a ride that worked better for me because it was like 10 o'clock in the morning and not 6 o'clock in the morning because I'm a student, right? So I'm like, this is great. I can bike to wherever these things are. I went on, they had some trips that people organized. Let's see, they had Tour of New England. So they hit 5 states. And
they did that?
Yes. And self-organized. So
yeah, and
then they had a Boston to Quebec ride. So
mm-hmm.
we drove. We effectively we biked. I think it was over the course of 8 days. Probably the whole trip was 8 days, where we did different legs, working our way up to Wolfsboro. Just every day we were staying in not Airbnb, but bed and breakfast.
Yeah,
and then we would. Stayed in Quebec City for a couple of days, and then everyone came in the van back. But that was less than $1,000, including for one meal, lodging, and transport back. And it was all self-organized by this club that the people that just seemed like they're having a good time and putting things together. And that was perfect for me. Actually, there was really one fun trip. We were they had a Vermont trip where we basically went to a bed and breakfast in Vermont, and they had different rides per day.
Yeah.
And
So it's like a mini training camp almost.
exactly. I left my shoes at home.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but someone helped get me into a bike shop, and I switched to a different speed plays actually. And I was actually having knee problems, and then I put on speed plays, and I was like, hey, this is great. I'll never have to do this ever again. So the CRW always was welcoming, and it was economical for someone just starting out from school, and that was part of my story of how I got involved with CRW back in late 90s or in the 90s, just starting out cycling before I started doing racing or anything else. So it was a good gateway for me in terms of getting involved with the club.
So what would you say is, the mission of the club today?
The mission of the club today is we have an educational angle as well as understanding that we want to be supportive of riders of all different kinds and different types. We have a gravel program. We have an exciting program called Devo, which is really around personal development of your own. So you set up goals and you decide and you make your own goals. So it's not racing because we're not a race club, but that's a way for people to get.
So how does that work? Is it a training plan?
So it is I think it's self-declared internal. Like they have their own. Right now, it's along the lines of people just wanting to better themselves. So, whether it's via Zwift in setting targets, we have like climbing, Everesting, like so people that want to do like goals like that.
Are you putting your goals out there for other club members to see?
That's one of the things that we want to do as an upgrade, or I want to do as an upgrade. Yeah, because I actually do. I'm very excited to think about how we surveyed our members last year. And we wanted to understand, we have about just shy of 2,000 members. Just so
2,000?
2,000, yes.
It's a big club.
It's a big club. But we asked our members how many of them, what kind of training do they do? A lot of them are involved with charity rides, PMS Challenge being the biggest one for sure. This is all the responses we got. And part of it, I have some ideas this year or maybe next year. I'm not sure. It depends on volunteer. If we're a volunteer-run organization, part of it is do we have the volunteers to do these kinds of things? I'd love to actually structure training programs that you've done running before.
Yes.
So you go on websites. They have couch to 5K in a month or whatever. Right?
Exactly.
So I feel like that's one of the things that we could be doing as a club. Right. So if you think about how many people want to do a charity ride, never done one before. Right. So how do I go from couch to 100-mile charity ride century over the course of the season?
Sort of some pre-planned training plans. I'd like to be able to do 100 miles by July.
Yes.
Here's some general hours per week you could do. And I mean, listen, Training Peaks, you can buy $100 training plan, for as specific as a 40-plus-year-old athlete. They have all these very specific descriptors.
Yes.
40-plus-year-old mountain bike, 50-mile race. Here's the training plan.
Yes. But what those don't give you is riding with people.
Yeah, that's true.
Around safety.
You're going to do these intervals on Tuesday and Thursday and, group ride on Wednesday. So speaking of CRW with regards to the membership, you mentioned there's 2,000. Everybody that I've met through CRW, and I was introduced through it, something called Climb to the Clouds.
Yes.
Which used to start in Concord. I think now it starts in Sudbury, and it basically goes to the top of Wachusett and back for 100 miles. Met a lot of great people there. How is the organization structured? Is there a board of directors? You're the president. Are there ride leaders? Are there captains? Is there a team, like a race team? Like, I'm just curious how the whole thing is sort of set up.
Sure. There's a board. We have 9 directors part of the board. We have some standing committees. So we have a ride and safety committee. We also have an integrated operations committee, so that person kind of makes sure the trains are running, keep the trains running. And we've got in that ride committee, let me just come back into the ride committee, we have different coordinators that leads different programs. So we have Century coordinators. We have folks that work in the demo program, gravel ride. So we have basically people that are passionate about a particular topic, and they agree to step up and
Yeah.
help lead that across, working with volunteers to get these things done.
Is there a race team?
No race time.
No race team. Okay.
The closest thing we have is, actually, you mentioned one of our main events, the Century that we have,
Climb to the Clouds. Yeah.
which is actually a Devo sponsored program. So I talked about the Devo, and I rode with them, part of the Cranberry Century, which is one of our marquee
Love
events.
that one.
Yeah,
My favorites.
so I said, let me sign up for the 22 mile hour plus group, and I lasted for. It was really cold that day, and my fingers were like, we don't like this. I didn't last very long, but they were going 22 plus. So I'm like, for people that, sometimes people think of CRW. It's very interesting because we have some people are like CRW is too slow. Some people say CRW is too fast, and we're looking for that Goldilocks zone.
Well, the rides I've done, there's always been, the 12 mile, the 14 mile per hour group, 16, 18, 20, 22. There's always a group for somebody. That's at least been my experience.
Yes, that's what we strive to do that.
Yeah.
And it always just takes making sure that we wrestle or arm wrestle to get someone like, we need someone to lead this 16 to do this at this particular pace.
How do you guys communicate with your members? Is there a newsletter? Is there a Slack channel? Like the Winchester Rippers have an awesome structure with the group meet channels. Like, how do you guys communicate?
Yes, we have a platform, so website where members can see what's happening. We also do email blast. We do have Slack that folks also leverage and use. And
can you post a ride to the Slack channel and other folks might join you for the ride? Or
we have that happening informally, but from our formal rides, we want to make sure they're covered by insurance. So there's some things we have to do a little differently than the Rippers. I'm a Ripper too, so
okay, yeah, but so you know what I'm talking about, the group meet channel, that it's very convenient to say, hey, I'm riding on Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock from this gas station. So CRW doesn't quite have that.
We do not today.
So how would, if someone wanted to ride just informally with other CRW members, how would they communicate with?
If it's informal, you could do it in Slack. That's probably the best way to do that.
Okay.
For our formal rides, we want to make sure there's a safety talk. Because we for our rides, who's coming? We don't know who's coming, right? So in 2,000 members, we have a wide spectrum of abilities. So we want to have some consistency around the experience and making sure that people that show up are assured and know some certain things. So the Rippers, I think, they're actually gotten kind of big, but not as big as CRW.
Yeah.
And I just say that with love and affection for the Rippers.
I understand. No, but I think that's that's one of the things that makes CRW unique to me, is that when you do show up to a ride, there's always a safety talk. You typically, if you're not a member, have to sign some sort of waiver or go online and do that. What else makes CRW a unique club in your mind? I
think the size of it. I think our marquee of events like those centuries, and there are a lot of people. I was one of them for many years. All they do is they sign up for those centuries because they'll use it as training for other events, right? Yeah. So that happens, and we acknowledge that. But we are trying to do a lot of work to try to build up more community. We have one of our ride leaders. She's very dedicated. She's actually on the board. She has a ride she does in Arlington. We did our ride leader award ceremony. She's not eligible for an award. She should have gotten an award if she wasn't on board. Effectively, she led a ride every, I think it feels like it's 4 days out of the week over the course of a year.
Wow.
Right?
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
People show up?
Yes, people show up.
So, so let me ask you, we've interviewed running clubs and cycling clubs on this podcast, and a lot of the great clubs have 2 or 3 training rides or runs each week. Does CRW have a go-to training ride every week that folks should know about?
We have more than one. And that's part of what I'm trying to, part of the things I'm trying to do. I'm calling something called neighborhood ride. So we have, in Lexington, there's a battle. We have Wednesday wheelers. We have Bike Thursday. These are very popular rides. And then we have a number of them on the weekends. So
And you can find all these on the website?
on our website and
Okay.
in our ride calendar, we call it. So we have, I think last year, if we looked in totality, we had almost 300 plus events.
That's incredible.
So
that's a combination of training rides plus these centuries we've been talking about.
Yes, correct. So we basically have something going almost almost every day. If you look at the calendar, in the summer, we might have 3 or 4 rides going on at the same time, right? So it's just, but on average, we look at it and it's like, wow, that's a lot of events we put on this past year.
Yeah. So let's talk about, you've been president for about the last year or so. This podcast is being recorded in December of 2024. How has your experience and sort of unique perspective to this sport help you become a leader in the club and sort of shape where you want the club to go?
So I think that there's a rich history with CRW. 60 years of rides and experience with the members. I think one of the things that we got an email from someone who moved to Washington, D.C., or I don't know if they're Washington, D.C., but they wanted to say, hey, you guys want to join us on a panel at the National Bike Summit? Because there's something happening with aging population where a lot of bike clubs are seeing aging membership. And I'm going to bring in another perspective. So, okay, so put that in one.
Put a pin in that.
Put a pin in that. And then I was doing a thing for one of my other organizations, Naked, New England Cycling Coalition for Diversity, where we were asking and interviewing, talking to people at an event on the Minuteman this past summer.
Nice.
And we're starting to ask people like, what's your experience with working with bike clubs? Are you a part of bike clubs? And some people, just young people, coming up to me saying like, why would I join a bike club? So we got the perspective of, do we have an aging population that seeks camaraderie and wants to build up a community? And we got, on the other hand, we got some younger people that are like, what's the benefit of having a bike club? And, if you actually think about the pandemic, was another dimension, right? A lot of people just a lot of people got out on bikes.
Yeah. Tons of people.
Tons of new people, tons of new riders. Are they part of a bike club? Do they understand that? And I think you and I just talked about this, right? You can get these plans that could make you the best, strongest biker, but you may not be a good cyclist. Yeah. And those are two different things, right?
Yeah, you need some pack skills.
Yes, exactly, to make this work. I guess you asked your initial question was just about the presidency.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that's different about me is that I was bringing in a perspective of I still have a day job, and a lot of times we've had people that were retirees or something along those lines. So like, how can we structure the club to work for people that aren't 100% dedicated to this, and can we do this at scale? So I think.
Folks that I would say the way you're describing those folks are the folks that really have a hard time or really need to balance work, family, and fitness.
Yes.
Right? You got the working folk, you got to go home and deal with the family. And also, I'd love to ride my bike as much as I can, but balancing all that. So you bring that perspective.
I'm trying to bring that perspective into the organization. And the other thing I would say that my background is information systems in IT and things along those lines. And so we really wanted to bring the club into the 21st century, I would say, just because, it was a volunteer organization. You know how CRW started? I mean, one of the things they used to do is, people will call a number, hey, we're going to have a ride on Saturday for, so they used to use a phone, and that's the way people found out where the rides were, right? Yeah, now we have a website. Things have gotten a little more mature. We had a website before, and it served its purpose, but we wanted to have mobile apps and other things. So we have now mobile apps. People will do mobile check-in.
There's a CRW app?
Yes. Well, we use a platform called Wild Apricot, and it comes with an app. So you can check in, you can see the rides, you can register, all these kinds of things are
wow.
Part of
all right. Listen, I got to download that. Wild Apricot.
Yes, it's a member app. Yes. So yes, that was one of the things I wanted to make sure we had, the ability to do things mobily. So
Okay, so in your presidency, like what are some of your top priorities you'd like to see happen or change or develop?
and I think the priorities were operationally getting us in a better place so we could scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're still there's growing pains. It's not always you could do it overnight, but um, part of it was getting us on the website, getting us with the mobile app. So check those things have been done.
Nice.
Now, how do we get the volunteers to get them more engaged with our platform and how we do things? We have a wide spectrum of computer abilities too, right? So that's something we just have to think about. How do we move the whole population?
I mean, do you guys use like Sign Up Genius to get, that's a program?
I know Sign Up Genius, okay. Yes.
To get volunteers to sign up for events. And just curious what you guys use for that.
For our centuries, we end up we partner with groups that are local to the area, and they'll handle the table or when we my gosh,
a local like community group, like
yes.
like a church or like Boys and Girls Club, or
people that are usually affiliated with outdoor events will help us with Metapoisa something we have organizations that will work with, and that's one way that we get volunteers. But I guess we actually the other day we put out an email out to everybody saying, here are some volunteer opportunities that you can have within the club. We got a response from a woman, and we looked her up, and she's like, she hasn't done a lot of rides with us, but she's like, I was a member in the 90s or the 2000s, but I really want to get involved. And she said, what I love about this is the community. And I was like, oh, this is very interesting. She said, so if you put out the call, people will respond. You just need to make sure you put the call out there.
So actually, I had a community question. Do you guys collaborate with other organizations like Mass Bike or NEMBA?
Yes.
Or what do
we
you
do? We have a grant program. So we, as part of our mission, so we're a 501c3 organization.
Mm-hmm.
So part of that is education and making sure that we bolster biking infrastructure. Some things that we don't really focus in on. So advocacy in terms of like how my Mass Bike does it, we don't do that. They received one of our grants this past year.
Who did?
Mass Bike.
Mass Bike? Oh, yes. Okay. Very nice.
And so we, people have an opportunity to apply for a grant, and we can give them out. And we have done things where we've asked our membership, where do you want our grant money to go this year? So like we've done, Bike Not Bombs has been another one of our frequent,
nice
people that we give money to. So these things have, so I guess your initial question was just how do we partner? So if it's about cycling, it helps with education. We think there's member benefits. We're open to it. Yeah.
So you're in an indirect way, you're supporting sort of the cycling infrastructure in and around the Boston area. Mm-hmm. I see all these new, bike lanes popping up, and it sounds like you guys play sort of a small part in that. Back to some of your signature events. If you could list off, maybe your top 3 or 5. We mentioned Climb to the Clouds, which I think still exists.
Yes, it went away for a while, and now it's back. We have some folks that we're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to get this done. I think putting on a century is not as simple as like, hey, we're just going to have a bunch of people go out for a 100-mile ride, right? I mean, there's a lot of logistics to it. You've got to permit, working with the towns to make sure that they, get their whatever requirements they put in front of you. Those requirements evolve and change like this past year. So the Cranberry Century is one of the ones that we do. This year, an official said, hey, I think you guys need to have an ambulance at the beginning of the ride. So we had to pay for an ambulance at the beginning of the ride. We're just like, this doesn't make sense. I think you may need an ambulance at the end for some of the people, but not the beginning of the ride. But
interesting. Wow.
Yeah, so we had...
I think I remember seeing the ambulance there, actually.
Yes. And I'm just, as the president, I'm looking at this and like, dollars just going tweet, tweet, tweet.
Boy.
But... so towns have their demands. You have the permitting process is longer than you think it's going to take, and then you put, coordinating all the volunteers, making sure you have support vehicles. All that stuff is just logistics, right?
Yeah.
So we have 3 main events that 3 centuries that we've put on that I would say the marquee events that we're known for. We have the North to New Hampshire Century. That's usually in May.
Otherwise known as the Spring CRW Century.
Yes, Spring Century, exactly.
And is it also a shorter event? If anybody's listening out there and they don't want to do 100 miles, what else for routes?
So all the routes have on these, we typically will support, we've gone down to 35 miles. Actually, in the Cranberry Century, we had a 30-mile route this year.
30 and a metric century?
30 metric, 50, I think, and then also 100.
There were 4 routes?
I believe so. But
Wow.
part of it is just making sure that, we coordinate the stops and make sure that there's not too many, all the stops, we want to leverage them. So
Yeah, you want some overlap.
routes,
Yeah.
very exactly.
So we've got the Spring Century.
Yep,
What's
that's in
next?
May. And then we have the Climb to the Clouds, which is we've done it usually in June or July, and this year we pushed it out to August. So that was an experiment.
Okay.
We may pull that one back to July again. We competed against Mount Washington. We realized when we first did it, and then we're like, okay, we need to change to a different date and et cetera.
Well, and then the day after Mount Washington is there's a local Tour de Cure event.
Yes,
which doesn't get many Mount Washington folks, but
presumably, yes. And then we have our Cranberry Century, which is usually we use that to close out the season. Primarily, those are our 3 main events. That doesn't mean that we don't have centuries at other points of the time. Like I did a few years ago, I did a Major Taylor century ride. So effectively, I rode from Winchester out to Worcester, watch people go do the George Street hill climb race, and then we came back.
Oh, that's nice. So you did that sort of more informally with CRW members?
With CRW, it was on the ride calendar.
Oh, it was actually, okay.
It was an actual event, and I let some people out there.
But you guys stopped for your own drinks on your own.
Yes,
nothing
exactly.
Okay.
Yes, not supported.
Yeah.
Sport on your own, supported ride.
I think that the Cranberry Century is a hidden gem in New England. It is. It starts in Miles Standish State Park. It's super well organized. The route is just fantastic. It's sort of rolly, not too hilly, and it's just endless miles of beautiful pavement around these cranberry bogs.
Yes, I agree 100%. I've set my best cranberry. The Cranberry Century is where I've done my best times in terms of centuries.
Set your PR there, huh?
Yes,
Nice.
twice. And that's funny. Everyone, there's the flattest ride century of the New England, and I think we're lower than that actually.
The flattest ride is in
It's in Rhode Island.
Rhode Island, yeah.
That's it, right?
But that's still pretty hilly.
Yeah, it's pretty hilly, exactly. I think I'll have to look at the elevation gain to see what the story is there.
What does CRW do to encourage new riders to get involved in cycling, particularly new riders that might be intimidated by doing a group ride?
We do the safety talk. That's part of it. We are. I think part of it, some of the things that we approach that you just talked about, where we say that we are going to be intentional about declaring what speeds you guys are at. Part of the data set that now we have when people register, we ask them how fast are you intending to ride this ride at, right? So that helps the ride leader.
I have no idea. What if they have, I'm not sure. I'm new to this. Where do I go? What do I show up? Which ride should I show up to, Randolph? Tell me. We do get people that inquire and ask those kinds of questions, and we will front that kind of question and say, like, here are some rides we recommend. That's a good idea for us to think about how. Is there one like that just off the top of your head? Like, hey, there's a great Saturday ride out of XYZ parking lot that a newbie, I'm just saying on this podcast, if there's anything you could announce about that. Is there a particular...
Well, I love the Lexington Battle Road series is good.
And when is that?
It's on the weekends.
What time?
It varies. That's the
okay.
One
So
thing.
you'd have to tap into the calendar.
You do need to tap into the
calendar.
calendar.
It's what is it, 20 miles or so, or is it
30?
30. Okay.
Yep. And we have Thank God It's Friday ride that goes out of Bedford as well. That's every right after work.
After work, okay, you got
6 o'clock. So, it depends on the sun, because they want to make sure they get back before dark.
Yeah, so these are rides that happen sort of after daylight savings kicks in.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I know personally of someone who got into cycling out of Boston. They joined the ride, I think it was out of Nahant Park near Wells Ave. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, that series went on for a very, very long time. I actually participated in a number of those rides as
Does
well.
it still occur?
No, it doesn't. But they had at one point like many, many weeks of continuity. I can't like 300 or 400 weeks.
Probably years.
Yes. Yeah, it went over for
Rain
years.
or shine.
Yes, exactly. And I think it fell apart when some nor'easter or something. I can't remember exactly.
Oh,
when.
no.
Yeah, the streak ended. But that is part of the appeal. What you just asked for is part of the reason why I'm saying like we need to have these neighborhood rides that are consistent and people understand and know it, because I know that there are still cyclists showing up at Nahant Park. I heard there's a ride here that I can go and join. Right?
Exactly.
And someone just told me the other day. They're like, "Hey, isn't there a ride from Nahant Park that you guys are?" I'm like, well, it's kind of dead. But so the idea of having consistency, because one of the things that I would say as the president, I have also changed. I didn't like the fact that, we talked about the demographics of the club being different and people or younger people. One of the things that I guess I was tapped into, I looked at CRW as a place, I don't want to call it, this is maybe not the best way to characterize it, but it was like, where's the ride from CRW this week? So people look at the calendar, they say like, oh, I don't want to go to Hopkinton today. Like, because we'd have a ride in Hopkinton, we'd have another ride in, it could be in Somerville.
Yeah.
And then we could have another ride in, on the South Shore. So like we had rides. Yeah, we had rides, but they were all over the place. And so that would mean you either bike to the start. Some of us are fine with doing that.
Or drive.
Most people drive. And I was just like, this isn't a way to build up more community, because you kind of want to need to have people that that you ride with all the time to actually build up that community. And that's one of the things I would say that Rippers does really well. So that's one of the things I'm trying to get more to happen.
This person I was talking about, so they were a newbie cyclist and they showed up to this weekly Saturday ride, and basically CRW helped them go from a very novice cyclist to someone who's doing, 7,000-8,000 miles a year. And I just thought that was cool, and CRW played a big part in that. So if someone is listening and wanted to get involved with CRW, how do we go about doing that?
The best way to do that is go to our website, crw.org. We have a calendar that's available with all of the events that you can participate and join up for.
Do I have to pay anything?
You can ride with us 2 times a year without any
No fees?
With no fees, but our membership is very reasonable, $20.
$20?
$20.
Oh, come on. Everybody should sign up.
And then there's our contact us form on there that, if you want to talk about volunteering or you want to get more involved with anything, we've got partnerships. We have revamped it recently. So I think that's a good way to reach out to us.
That's cool. All right, $20. Sign up for CRW. So we'd like to ask folks a couple of questions to close out the podcast.
Okay.
So you personally, it sounds like you've raced and ridden all over New England. CRW ride or not, are there any hidden gem events or routes that you can share with our podcast listeners that we might not know about? I mentioned that my hidden gem is the CRW Cranberry Century in the fall. So you can't take my answer. But do you have any events or routes or anything that you've run into?
You stole one of the better ones from us. Thank you very much. I guess when I think about my rides to Montreal, there were some definitely some areas, and now you're going to ask me like Route 100, because actually people do Route 100. I know there's organized rides on Route 100.
Yeah, there's the 200 on 100, which is 200 miles from the border of Canada down to the border of New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Yeah, that's on my bucket list.
Yeah, and recently I'd say that I did. This was also a great ride. I mean, I did the Ithaca to Boston route just on my own.
I mean, what is this, like 5 days?
It was 3. I was trying to do it in 2. It ended up being 3.
So it's over 300 miles?
It's 400 plus miles. So I won't go into the whole story, but the Empire Trail that opened up, I wanted to do the Empire Trail. So I went from Ithaca up to the Empire Trail. I don't.
Is
You know,
this a
you
rail
said
trail?
yeah. Well, it's not. It goes. It's on the river.
Mm-hmm.
And it went from Troy to Albany. Effectively, that's what I was on. So it was very fascinating, different experience to be basically on
Wow.
like the Minuteman for 80 miles or
Oh,
60
boy.
miles, whatever. How I was on it, but it was really. They had really nice stops on there, and I can see how a family can turn this. I actually did this. There was a New York Times series that someone was like, I'm not really that much of a cyclist, but I'm going to do the whole thing. And so her and her husband, he would drive her to a section and she would do like the section and write about her experience on that. And so that became a series. So I actually really enjoyed it, even though it was relentless because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was doing it for 80 miles, but it was really interesting to do that kind of, I thought that was good. I don't know if that's hidden though.
That's cool. Well, that is outside of New England, so
Oh,
I have
sorry.
to delete that from this episode. But no, that's cool. I think that's a hidden gem. And what's it called again?
It was the Empire Trail.
The Empire Trail. All right, I'll have to look that one up. And a follow-up question is, why do you agree that New England is the greatest endurance region in the U.S., if not the world?
I think that we have lots of seasons. We are hardy. We're ready for anything because we've seen everything, right? I mentioned before, I think that I started one of my early cycling experiences was doing the AIDS ride with Hurricane Floyd.
Yes.
I remember going into Wheelworks, the bike shop, and getting my girlfriend at the time, now my wife. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go in and get a new rain gear for this ride, and so I went, and everyone's getting this gear. We had Mayor Menino sat up there, and we're like, we're gonna go, and then they said, I'm sorry, we're not gonna let you go. You're gonna get in the buses. Everyone's boo.
Well, yeah. I mean, any other part of the country, they probably would have canceled it the day before. But now you have all these cyclists show up. They still canceled it. It sounds like, but
yeah, they did. But
the point is that like those hardy New Englanders were ready to tackle it.
That's right.
And actually, just a quick story about that. We had the Tour de Cure in 2024 in August, and it was torrential downpour at the start. There were still 300 riders that showed up and basically did the 60 or 100 mile version. So is there anything else you'd like to plug or mention today with regards to CRW that maybe we didn't cover?
CRW is a welcoming organization. However, I would say that we are doing some work to make sure that it's even more welcoming, meaning that we know that there's some experiences where people show up, they say that, and they get dropped. And so how do we manage that? So we were trying to figure that out. How do we make that a better experience for people? And so that's one thing I just want to acknowledge, that we've heard the voices of people and we want to try to figure out how we can make that better. But come out, join us for a ride or two or a few. And I think it gets, and you'll find that there are a lot of people that are passionate about cycling, and you can have fun as well on the bike.
And do folks, the folks that show up, what's the sort of demographics? Like, we've talked about aging population, but what's the breakdown in CRW, I guess, by age group? Yeah, I'm just curious, is 25%, under the age of 30?
It's hard for me we do capture the information. I haven't done it that way. I know we have a young contingent, because what ends up happening is people come here for college. They join the club.
That's an important point. Yes. Yep.
And so they join the club, they do rides with us, and then they graduate and go somewhere else. So then, so we actually, the amount of turnover for our club this last year, so we have 25% new coming in. So
wow.
it's pretty, it's very high. 70%, 75% stable. And we know we have a lot of people that sign up sometimes for those century events, and then we don't see them a lot.
Exactly.
So how do we make that
make it stick? Yeah,
make it stick. Exactly. So that's one of the challenges we're trying to work on.
And you know what else? I'll just mention closing out here. You and I mentioned the Rippers. We're both members of CRW. We're members of the Rippers. I have my own cycling team called Keep It Tight.
Yes.
Like, it's okay to be part of multiple cycling and running groups.
Yes.
Just for listeners out there. And it's cool. You can hop into rides and events with each group. And New England's a very small community. And you'll discover that not only are we in different clubs, but we also do different sports that are I joined Somerville Road Runners, for example. I'm not really a big running person, but on occasion, I hope to show up to some of those rides. And then we do some uphill skiing. There's a
Yes.
big uphill ski community, and we're all sort of trying to get our cardio endorphin rush with whatever way we can during the winter.
This is the endurance podcast,
Yes.
right? So, endurance can be in many forms of pain,
So Randolph, it was awesome to have you on the New England Endurance podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And sharing your story with us and the CRW story as well. Like I mentioned, I'm a proud member. If you want to check out CRW, look it up on crw.org. They also have an Instagram and Facebook page as well. I will tag them on our Instagram page, which is at New England Endurance. So thank you, Randolph.
Thank you so much for having me, and good luck with this podcast. It sounds like it's. I've seen the people you've interviewed, and I'm like, oh, that's a great list.
Awesome. So until next time, let's get out there, rain, snow, or shine, and explore the beautiful terrain of New England.